Well, welcome. My name is Sarah. I'm the community manager at the Sydney Knowledge Hub, and I'm going to be introducing this event today. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am currently sitting in the Sydney Knowledge Hub, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. And I would also like to acknowledge the land on which you may be joining from, the traditional owners of the land on which you may be joining from, whether you're in Australia or in the US like Rebecca. So a little bit about this event. We are really excited at the Sydney Knowledge Hub to be participating in this year's edition of the Visiting Entrepreneur Program. The Visiting Entrepreneur Program is organized by the City of Sydney every year, where they bring amazing speakers from overseas, usually physically, the past couple of years online, just to educate the ecosystem and grow knowledge and share knowledge with entrepreneurs here in Sydney. The Sydney Knowledge Hub is at the University of Sydney. We run a co-working space for research-based startups and organizations. So for us, when we saw this year that the theme was quantum and biotech, we really wanted to be on board. And especially since we opened in October 2019, we've seen the number of quantum startups or people that are researchers and interested to commercialize is growing. And more of them are coming to us. You'll meet Tim Evans, who's the founder of Opacity later today and who's one of our members. So this event will have first a bit of a fireside chat between Professor Jim Rabeau, who's from the School of Physics at the University of Sydney and also Deputy Director at Sydney Nano, and Rebecca Krauthamer, who's the CEO and co-founder of Quantum Thought, and also founder and chief product officer at Q-Secure. And following that, we'll have a chat with Professor Halina Rubinsztein-Dunlop and Tim Evans. So yeah, I'll hand over to Jim now to talk to Rebecca and start talking about quantum and startups and universities. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah, for the introduction. And I want to thank the City of Sydney for organizing this and enabling this kind of conversation to happen. And welcome, Rebecca. So before I'll start asking Rebecca questions in a second, but before that, just to remind everyone what we're wanting to talk about today is we just want to discuss with Rebecca and the panel members what their thoughts are on how universities can play a role in this new emerging industry, quantum technology industry, and collaborative opportunities, support opportunities, feeding the ecosystem with new talent, etc. And just another thought that comes to mind in this is that quantum is, in my mind, the deepest of deep tech. So technology is hard at the best times. How do you do this in a world where it's like, where you're doing the deepest of deep tech? So welcome again, Rebecca. And maybe just to start off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you and what you do in the quantum space?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, James. So what I do a little bit of everything. I somehow found myself in the quantum space after my studies were in AI generally. So I kind of stumbled into AI also. I was at Stanford and it was the early 2010s and it was becoming the hot thing. And so got into AI. And really from there, I got into the big questions around AI and cognitive science. And I did not go on to get a master's or PhD, but I did go on to freelance after school and take on a bunch of different jobs where I was just building training models, getting a deeper hands-on experience in AI. And I did enough to kind of get frustrated with it. So get frustrated with the limitations that we have in terms of computing power versus what we can theoretically accomplish. And so when quantum computing came onto my radar several years ago, probably just about 3 years ago, it was a point of no return for me. And I started with a few co-founders. We started an incubator to just kind of play around with ideas in quantum computing, because it's such a new and emerging space. And so the idea was to start basically baby companies inside of this incubator, and we'd put people on them, and we'd give them money, and if they made something cool, that's awesome, we'll ultimately spin it out into its own company. And a lot of those projects we staffed with students from university. So people who were actually full-time students or part-time students, or doing their PhDs, were on these projects and helping build these things. And ultimately, the big sort of company that came out of this, that I spend most of my time on now, is a cybersecurity company. So it's in post-quantum cybersecurity, which is protecting against, when it comes to quantum computing, one of the main algorithms, or one of the most famous algorithms, is this one that can break public key cryptography. So a lot of the cryptography that our systems are based on now. So this company QSecure that I co-founded, we fight against that. So we build software to protect against these hacks. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all today. We very much, in quantum, work very closely with academia and universities, and we'll continue to do so.
That's amazing. I mean, just to me, to be doing this sort of stuff in a short space of time and jumping into forming an incubator like you did is just amazing and courageous. Since we do have a general audience, can I just ask you to just give us a sense for what was it about quantum computing that attracted you? Like what is the pull? What is the interest in quantum computing?
Yeah, sure. I think, initially it was the mystery and the promise of it, and it came somewhat from a somewhat naive place, but I think I'll be honest, and I don't always talk about this part of it, but a lot of it was, I became very passionate about the ethics of AI and the ethics of technology development. And so when I got into quantum, a friend of mine he heads up the Google X, or what is now Alphabet X, he heads up the quantum and AI side. And he and his team counted the number of people who were working in quantum. And he counted, and I think this was in the US, but he counted 800 people. And it was this small budding thing that was very exciting. And it was very clear to me after working in AI that we were reaching these limitations in terms of, if you've ever done anything in AI or heard about sort of the new developments, GPUs have really unlocked a lot of processing power for AI specifically in the last 5, maybe 10 years. But even still, we're reaching this limit with how many transistors we can fit on chips. And so we're hitting this point where we're probably not going to be able to, past a certain point, make much more progress. So it became clear to me that we need something to break past those limitations in terms of computing. So quantum computing was my bet, and that, along with being able to be so early in this industry that's going to have such a huge impact, specifically from me being able to shape it in an ethical direction and being able to have an impact on how it develops, that was really exciting for me. And then just, in general, to be able to be in so early and participate in all of the innovations that are yet to happen, because this is like being in the 1960s of classical computing, where we don't know what's coming, but and we don't know all the ways we're going to use this technology, but we know that there exist a lot of cool ways to use this technology.
No, that's really interesting, and I'm keen to. I do want to probe a little bit more deeply on that in a few minutes.
Sure.
Just again, sort of dialing back the clock to that 3 years ago when you made that shift and you formed, from how I understand it, you formed a company an incubator to bring in potential startups, and now you've kind of hooked onto one that is going well, and you're running with that. Is that roughly correct? Yeah. Can you, I was going to say, maybe just if it's not correct or whatever, just tell us a little bit more specifically about that, and maybe elaborate on how the interactions with the universities went and students and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Since I was associated with Stanford, we got to interact pretty closely with different groups at Stanford. So we worked with, there was an AI and finance lab that we did a lot of experiments with. So it was kind of a non-classical model for this business. It wasn't quite an incubator, wasn't quite a venture capital firm. It was, we'd put money into ideas that we thought were cool, and then we'd start them from scratch with people. And then so yeah, one of the cool things that we did, we worked on bond swapping, so municipal bond swapping. This problem of how to optimize how to exchange bonds and maximize returns, and kind of a sort of typical-ish problem in finance. And we worked with Stanford AI and Finance Lab on that. For several months, we worked on medical imaging, actually. So we played with quantum sensing, and quantum sensing. So, for the layperson, there's actually 3 branches of quantum information technologies, and the sexy one that everyone talks about is quantum computing. But there's also quantum communications and quantum sensing, and these use quantum properties to do other cool things. And quantum sensors are, you can use them to be really, really sensitive sensors. And so we worked on a project along with that, with another Stanford lab, and that was very cool. So it was in the medical school, and the cryptography stuff has been really interesting, because so quantum, it's really cool because a lot of these innovations are coming out of, and have to come out of, academia, because there's such deep research. Like you said, James, it's the deep tech, right? So this stuff was born at universities, and it's still in universities, because your average employee at a big company does not have the background to do this stuff. And so the bridge between academia and enterprise, or business, is kind of I see it as kind of a unique one, because there's so much money flowing into quantum computing, and businesses are being started around it, but they have to have these strong ties with universities to be able to bring about this breakthrough technology.
Yeah, I agree, and it sounds like the examples you've given are in line with that, in that you worked with the labs or the people in the universities to help you solve some of the technical problems.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's exactly the experience I think a lot of people would have, is that you do need this deep technology, and you need the research smarts, and getting those things to talk together with the business smarts is actually a really hard problem. So it's not just a matter of you being a business person, knocking on the door and saying, can you help me do this? So yeah. On that basis, and you came from Stanford and had existing connections there, but to just explore that in general a little bit, how can we do that better? How do you make that connection more easy and possible, and then help it foster it along to solve those problems?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would really love to see it happen more. I've had a lot of people reach out to me just cold, from universities, not necessarily groups or labs, but individuals that are studying quantum physics, or that are studying computer science, interested in quantum computing, reach out for internships, or reach out to, I'm taking this class, can I do a project for you? And my answer is typically yes. I love to work with curious people. So we have all kinds of stuff going on. One cool thing we're doing that I forgot to mention is a similar thing happened with Harrisburg University in Pennsylvania. We're doing research with them along with Amazon on Shor's algorithm, and trying to push forward breaking large numbers. But that project was born out of 2 students in Singapore reaching out to me. So I'd like to say I've done more active outreach, but a lot of it has been inbound. So I would encourage people to just reach out. Yeah.
I think it's a great point. Is that I bet you there are a lot of students either in undergraduate or in postgraduate studies who would love to hear what you just said, and that you're open to it, and probably they just don't know and wouldn't maybe have the confidence to reach out.
Totally. And one more thing on that is it's typically always men, which is great, but I would love to see more women reaching out too.
That's interesting, and I think the fact that we're talking to you and you're doing these amazing things, that I think we just need to keep getting the word out there and opening the doors. It's amazing what you're doing. I can't imagine like being kind of at the epicenter of all this activity. So it's fascinating.
It's fun. I've failed a lot. A lot of the things that we tried in quantum thought were did not totally work out. But you throw a million things at the wall, something's gonna stick, right?
Love it. Okay. Well, let me ask a little bit more on the ethics side of things, because it's let me back up a second. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of hype, a lot of interest in quantum, in particular quantum computing, about hardware development, software development, all this exciting stuff, and all the things we can do and problems we can solve. And there are conversations about the broader implications, like you mentioned, but I don't know too much about what is going on and what specifically is being done or can be done. So tell us a little bit about your interest in that and initiatives. How do we make something happen around that?
Totally. It's so because it's so early on and it's such a small field, which again means there's just so much potential to get involved, have an impact, discover something, which is exciting. Because of that, there's a lot of these budding initiatives around ethics. So I've gotten to be part of the World Economic Forum's initiative to put forth quantum computing ethical development frameworks. And I'm actually working with Vikram, who is the CEO of Quintessence, an Australian company, and actually Q-Secure is a customer of Quintessence, very happy customer. Vikram's amazing. He's part of that initiative as well. I've seen him a couple times at this event. And that's one. There's various other things going on, and a lot of what we're talking about right now is it's very a lot of the learnings from this are drawn from what we got wrong and right with AI and high performance computing. So things that are important or that I find pressing is what we run into with AI is not just sort of the runaway idea of Terminator or Skynet or the Robopocalypse, but more near-term stuff like access to the technology. Is it going to increase socioeconomic divides? How can we make it accessible to everybody? And then there's the other side of it where these models, these things that we've trained to learn and make decisions based on data, taking the human out of the loop, are we training them to be fair, to not be biased in ways that maybe humans have historically been biased or prejudiced? And these carry over very much to quantum computing, especially going forward. There may be more black boxy applications where we feed data in. We don't know kind of what's going on inside, what connections it's weighted to make. So being very deliberate about that, I think those are two areas. One thing that is cool about quantum computing is this revolution is happening on the cloud, right? So access is a little bit more equally distributed in theory. But yeah, those are
okay. I mean, it's a large, complex area, and I mean, I guess tying it into the theme of the discussion is, you know, is there an opportunity to be more explicit about this aspect of quantum technology in the early stages, like at the research level? I don't know. I mean, I'm just putting it out there, but what are your thoughts on that sort of thing? And maybe teaching and education.
You know, I think absolutely. I mean, I think if I had to choose between a group of people that have been in business for 20 years or people who are still university in academia to build like ethics around quantum computing or technology, I would absolutely 100% of the time choose academia, because it's where you kind of, it's where I first started thinking about the big questions and where I got the most reinforcement to think about these things deeply. And you have less, at this point, less kind of monetary pressure to make decisions one way or another. So just from kind of the, I guess, pseudo-philosophical side, I would hope that more people in university are contributing to this discussion. I would love to see more technology ethics classes. One thing that I've started to implement in businesses is having so product manager is a popular role, but also having a ethics manager for different projects and frameworks. I can share some out after, but there are various frameworks for working on projects, or not frameworks, but sort of sheets where you can check things off, like, have I considered this? Have I considered that? And yeah, I think
that's really great, and I think it's like this technology is revolutionary, and I think it's going to call for some revolutionary broader ideas and initiatives to make sure we do it right.
Yeah.
I think, Rebecca, that's been fantastic, and don't go anywhere, because you're on the panel that I want to open it up to right now as well. So thanks for all of that chat, and I'll just ask Tim and Halina to activate, and so I'll just give a very quick introduction, and we'll sort of get right into the questions. We have another roughly 20 minutes to talk, and then I'll open it up as well to questions from the attendees. So Professor Halina Rubinsztein-Dunlop has been in the quantum research community in Australia for many, many years, and is currently director of the Translational Research Lab at the University of Queensland, which is part of the Centre of Excellence for Engineered Quantum Systems, the ARC Centre of Excellence. So welcome, Halina. And Tim Evans is a previous student, I'm not entirely sure, but you can clarify that, at the University of Sydney in quantum, and is a co-founder and CEO of a company called Opacity Quantum. And so I think these two members of the panel, we're grateful to have you here, are a great complement to Rebecca. And so welcome, and let me just get right into it. Halina, you're the director of this Translational Research Lab, which I believe is the first and potentially still the only lab of its kind wanting to translate specifically quantum tech into commercialized technology. Can you just give us a little bit of information about that and tell us a bit more?
Sure, with pleasure. So as Jim said, I'm part of the Center of Excellence for Engineered Quantum Systems. And so the mission of the center is to build machines that harness the quantum world for practical applications. So it goes without saying that translational research is an intrinsic part of reaching that goal. So what we have established is the program that we call Translational Research Program, or laboratory, or both. And what it is all about is to enable people to reach from pure research towards commercialization. So we all know that there is a lot of, if we are clever, there is a lot of money for good ideas in basic research. And so there is a lot of funding coming our way, and our people can develop the ideas and do a lot of get a lot of wonderful results. But eventually, if there is a thought of commercialization of those results in some way or other, there is a big valley of debt, a gap in funding that is available to these people to actually reach the commercialization stage, where people will invest money for them when there are prototypes already in action to reach, to do proper commercialization. So we come into this valley of death, and we have established some programs which are supposedly or hopefully helping people to bridge that gap and reach the commercialization stage. So we call it translation. So Tim Evans, who will be talking in a minute, is a good example of one of those or two of those programs that we run. So it starts, so first of all, I think that it is important to say that the program that we run, we do not pick winners. We want people to establish whether there is anything that they think is worthwhile to commercialize, and help them find the best ways of going about it. And we are basically ready whenever the people are ready. And it is important to also view this activity as not something that gives you top up for your research. This is really for breaking into real applications world and commercialization. And so in order to achieve all that, we have created a number of programs which can help people achieve those goals. And one of the programs is the one in which Tim participated in, and it is to create stipends for people who want to engage in commercialization. So what we create are the stipends that go for PhD students. Tim was PhD student when the idea came around, and what it gives them is an extra six months, up to 6 months time, full time, with the stipend to pursue the translation of the research. So that's one for PhD students. There's another one which is for postdoctoral fellows. As we all know, postdoctoral fellows always have very short appointments. And so if they want to embark on translational research, it's very time consuming. So we provide again a gap, the stipend that will provide them with funding that they can then use for translation research. And the third one is a facilitation project. So the center, our translational research program, can give, after application process, without picking winners, can give the funding, which normally is up to $50,000, in order to pursue translation, and that has to be matched with equivalent or slightly smaller funds from some other internal or external sources. So this enables people to embark on these programs that we have. We also provide a lot of education in how to go about translation, because we all know that, you know, we might be clever scientists, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being fantastic commercialization people, and normally it's not. So we bring courses to people and try to make discussions with our stakeholders to see how we can help.
Yeah.
And I should say, just one more sentence, Jim, that within a very short period of time, since we started these programs, we have had 13 projects and 4 startups. So there must be something that we are doing right. But before you cut me off, one more thing to add to what Rebecca said, that we also within our center have a postdoctoral fellow who is leading research into responsible, looking at responsible research. And I think that that's very important to be embarking on this area now, when we are sort of bridging these gaps of research, translation, and society. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, thank you, Halina. That's great, and it's come such a long way. And I do want to ask a little bit about the projects and startups, because that was definitely a point of interest. And by the way, I would never dare to cut you off. I just Now that's a great connection though to Tim. So let's introduce Tim again. And Tim, you're like, you know, the example of a researcher entrepreneur, and I think, you know, I imagine again there's a lot of students out there who think, how do I possibly do this? How can I be like Tim? He's got a startup company and all of that. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about how you ended up where you are, you know, just in a fairly brief way, but how you ended up where you are, and then how you managed to get the funding from the system to support you and kickstart you, and then where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So cheers, Jim. I guess the first and foremost, you just heard from Halina that we've had a huge amount of support from our Centre of Excellence, which is called EQUS. And Halina and Michael have been awesome and sort of facilitating and helping guide us through that process. But sort of specific to what you were saying about being researcher and entrepreneur, academia and entrepreneurship are not exactly, you know, a perfect match, especially science, right? So, I mean, quantum tech is, as Rebecca already mentioned, is extremely academic, and a lot of the problems that need to be solved require, you know, a high level of technical literacy. But I guess a huge difference there is that on one hand, you've got science, which is all about care, precision, rigor, and taking your time to sort of build up, you know, your results to be watertight and tie up all your loose ends. That's what good science is. Whereas on the other hand, commercialization is all about being lean. That means one, not building the perfect thing that you wanted to build, but instead actually trying to build the thing that your customer wants. And sort of two, you end up building, you know, the simplest version of what your customer wants and will actually get some value from and potentially pay for. So this is kind of the war that goes on between sort of science and commercialization, and that's not something you learn in academia, especially not sort of in your standard education. And so that was something that I had to, and our team had to learn. And so we went through an accelerator program. So Sarah already mentioned that we went through Incubate, which was an accelerator at the University of Sydney, and they were just amazing. It was such a fantastic program, and we learned heaps, but we learned specifically those things that we were missing. Yeah, we were constantly sort of challenged to sort of do that and be leaner and try not to be a scientist when you're trying to build a company. And then you learn all the other stuff like tax and law and company structure and all that sort of thing, which is great. Yeah, my advice to anyone who wanted to sort of do that, especially in a university, is to find out whether your university has an incubator or accelerator. If you're at USyd, check out Incubate. That's definitely the one I would recommend to send you to. And yeah, those were, I guess, the things we had to learn in terms of, you know, specific to being in a university and what are the challenges of commercializing in a university. I mean, the number one, and actually, Jim, you've helped us with this specifically, the number one most important and difficult thing to navigate in a university is IP. And I can't really overstate how important it is to get that all organized and all ironed out early on when you're trying to commercialize something from your research. Every university is going to be different. They're going to have their own IP policy, but if you are starting a company and as a researcher at a university, this is your step 0. So yeah, that would be the thing that has been the hardest thing for us to navigate, because it's slow, it's painful, but it has to be done. And the sooner you start it and the sooner you get that ball rolling, the better. So yeah, that's probably the hardest thing we've had to do. And again, EQUS, the translational research program, having that support from Halina and Michael and that team has been awesome to sort of go up again, to sort of talk to the university commercialization lawyers. They're all lawyers, and as a student, when you're sort of going into a room full of lawyers and talking about things that you know nothing about, it can be pretty intimidating. So having that support was awesome. Yeah.
Tim, that's a really great story. I love it. And actually, we spoke probably 2 years ago, and it's amazing you've persisted through and navigated. And so congratulations on that. Now, this is interesting. So I'd like to bring back in Halina and Rebecca as if you want to jump in a sec. But basically, Tim and Halina, you've just articulated kind of this this translation piece of kind of filling a pipeline. And now this picture I have in my head is that the pipeline's being filled and Tim's kind of going through and bridging that gap. And probably that's where kind of people like Rebecca and other entities that work the same way are potentially can connect with people like Tim, startup companies. What are maybe Halina, can you just say a little bit about how do you feel about this, you fill the gap, but how do you project beyond that and then help fill that pipeline, for example, that Rebecca is wanting?
So I suppose that it would be fair to say that it's not only filling the gap as far as this one step is concerned, it's also providing contacts with potential companies and people who could support the commercialization. So this is not necessarily us bringing it in, but providing the contacts and providing the sort of know-how, how to approach it and how to discuss it, and bringing them on board and having discussions with the inventors and seeing whether they can go any further. So I suppose so this is still within bridging the gap, but this is carrying it forward to a full commercialization.
Yeah, it's so important. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts to add into that?
As far as the commercialization of research?
Yeah, I guess it's more like that notion of pipeline.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll give you a specific question is, have you come across similar models to what Halina has spearheaded here with EQUS and to help generate that new talent?
Honestly, no, and I didn't know about it, and it's very cool to know about it. No, I think there's a few incubators that I've seen. I know that the University of Chicago started one very, very recently, as well as CDL in Toronto, the Creative Destruction Lab.
Okay.
But yeah, no.
I mean, it highlights the gap of
absolutely
of that gap that Halina mentioned. It highlights it. Go ahead.
My question is, how do you feel about? I know we've kind of on the IP side, like you were talking about, Tim, but also on the, we have a postdoc. So we were working and we were basing some of our work off a paper that was published, and we were stuck. So a couple of my developers reached out to this woman, this postdoc, who had authored the paper, and now she works with us. So, how do you feel about us kind of taking people out of of your labs potentially, and kind of snatching them on the private side.
Halina, is that success?
Yeah, well, I would count it as a success. I think that to see our people being snatched up, and they are, a lot of them are snatched up by the companies or big startups. That's basically showing that, what we are doing is really good, and that people who are doing it are super. So I think that I would count it as a success. It's of course a little bit sad for us because we are losing them. However, that's what we are here for. So, seeing people's careers develop in that way is I suppose, very positive and rewarding.
Awesome to hear.
Yeah, that's really good. And I mean, on the just the last perhaps topic area is in terms of success. We know that Tim's a success. He's here in front of us. Halina, do you want to just give us another example of something that's been fostered within your labs and now is moving forward?
Okay, so there is another startup called Rabeau Systems, which are they are working from Macquarie Uni, and this is the program run by Matt van Brugel, and it started with his PhD. So he adopted an instrument which was normally used in astrophysics for spectroscopic purposes into quantum dots NV centers in diameter. And that developed into a new machine that can be used very broadly in many other areas in the society. So at the moment, they have miniaturized the spectrometer, they have the packaging done, and they actually have sold a number of instruments already, and they are going from strength to strength. And this is just an example of taking a technology which is there for some purpose or other, and then making it fit the purpose that you want to have, and then seeing bigger picture of where it can be used and how it can be used differently for purposes that are good for our society at large. And so I suppose that this is an example of, again, pure research going through to building a prototype and then building the real machines, which now can be used far from what Matt was using it in his PhD. It can be used in agriculture, it can be used in mining and so on. So there are many possible uses, and I hope that they will reach that stage where those instruments will be sold. So that's one good example. And then I can give you an example of something that we find very exciting, but it hasn't happened yet, but it's about to start. And this is a quantum weighbridge. I suppose that so this is still being developed, and it started with theoretical calculations about what it would be possible to do. So the whole idea is something like this, that you have this weighbridge on which you weigh big things like trucks and what have you. And these instruments for weighing the object is very complicated, it's large, it's heavy, and it's quite expensive. So what about using quantum for a quantum weight bridge? And so the idea behind it is that what people want to do is to use the gravitational acceleration, which the object creates when it's being weighed. And so I won't go to many details on that, how it is done in quantum, but I can only say that the preliminary calculations show that it should be sensitive enough to do it much better than the heavy, expensive weight bridge, which is in use now.
Quantum sensing.
So this is where we put our money in. So we put it into the project itself. We also put it into the person who is a newly examined PhD person. Rob Harris is his name, and he will be doing the project.
That's fantastic. That's amazing. Well, thanks for the story of Redback as well, which I also know. I'm trying to, so we're reaching sort of the end, and I'd definitely like to open up for questions. If you can either, Sarah, I guess you can put it in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand or something, and I can open up. Now, I want to kind of wrap here, as in, okay, where are we at? Maybe just asking Tim, you know, what are the things perhaps, have you identified things in your experience that you wish were a bit better or wish were more available to help you either for your next steps or as you were going along?
Yeah, I guess like I've already mentioned, we, you know, through EQUS we had a lot of help. I guess we were lucky that was the case. That might not be the case for everybody. But also, I guess once we went down this track and I guess felt validated that we could try it, because we could talk to people like, you know, Matt from Redback and sort of see that it was possible to do this sort of thing during your PhD. Once we started doing that, you know, we started talking to more people like yourself, Jim, and there was just a multitude of mentors and people around that could help. So I guess the tricky part really is to get people to realize that they can take these steps and that the help is out there. And once you actually start looking and knocking on doors and emailing people, even if it is cold, you get a lot of reception and a lot of help back. So that wasn't, you know, like once we got going, it wasn't hard. I guess in terms of making it easier, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but IP was the hardest part. And I think there is actually a lot, especially from sort of university side, that can be done to make this easier. I know it's a tricky topic, and when it comes to ownership of things like IP, then there's potential money involved, and that's when sort of things become a little bit less you know, easy. But I think the sort of view that I would that universities, I think, should sort of start to adopt is that you don't want to stifle and stop somebody from going on and potentially starting a startup because at step one it all comes undone because they can't commercialize because of IP reasons, or it's so hard that it took so long that they gave up on it. And startups sort of, you know, live and die so quickly. And so if anything is slow, it can often sort of translate to death. You know, it can be the end of a startup very easily. And I think universities need to recognize that there's so much to be gained from actually helping push these startups out the door, freeing up their IP, getting them sort of that so they can get investment. You know, a lot of investors are put off when IP is being assigned or shared by a university. This is hard, I know, but I think this is something that could be made better. I think.
Yeah, really great points, and having them, you know, right in front of you right now is valuable for us to hear, and I think empathize as well, because we all, many of us have gone through the same thing. Maybe just Rebecca, you know, from the other side of the spectrum, I mean, how about yourself in terms of accessing, whether it be talent like postdocs to bring into your projects, or you know, you're probably focused on your existing companies, but interacting with universities to extract the next startup idea. What is good, and maybe what can be made better?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the outreach has been inbound, and that's it. Again, I pretty much always say yes, and especially on the quantum thought incubation side. we do still sort of play with ideas, and Tim is probably more closer to the typical founder in the quantum space than I am. A lot of the founders of the biggest companies did come out of what they were doing as a postdoc, or I think on the pipeline side, one thing that I guess a lot of people who aren't in startups don't necessarily know is that often startups, especially in Silicon Valley, have a board of advisors, and they'll collect advisors just to show, hey, we have some expertise, they can weigh in on this or that. And so we have a few professors and as well as a few PhD students, postdocs, that are on our advisor board. You get some small shares in the company, and we'll ask you questions. The professors and heads of groups at universities have made really good introductions for us. We've also done events for recruiting, and a lot of really great people have come out of that. So I'd love to see more of that. But I think, as far as collaboration goes, we're very flexible on how we collaborate. The IP, to echo Tim, is always kind of it can be a sticky thing. But, a lot of the work we do open source, and we do things of that nature. So, we tend to be on the business side flexible. So would love to interact more.
That's great. Well, let me ask the attendees again if there's any specific questions for Halina, Tim, or Rebecca. Please open your mic or type something in. Okay, so Sarah, you're not getting anything, I guess, in the chat box.
No, I'm not getting anything.
Okay, well, I'm gonna keep going because I have more questions. Let me just ask that you each respond to this. This is off the notes. Not on the notes. What will be the first big impactful quantum technology that's going to be rolled out? We know that quantum supremacy has been achieved, but it hasn't really been impactful. It's been a big step, but it's not been impactful. So what will it be? Will it be the quantum ray bridge, for example, or will it be Tim, whatever you're doing? So maybe just starting with Halina, what's the next big thing in quantum?
Well, it's $1 million question, isn't it? I suppose that I would say that the biggest thing is to in the future use sensors and devices for wide societal applications. So, for example, taking a good sensor on a drone and running it over a big field to recognize crops or something of the sort. Is it the biggest thing in the world? It's not quantum computer, but for that we have to wait for a very long time. So this is immediate use of quantum technologies, which brings something new to the society of great value. Another example can be using quantum-based devices and sensors into medical imaging or biological applications. Can be a huge field to be able to, for example, do measurements beyond quantum limit by using these new techniques. How can we improve quantitative measurements in biomedicine and biology and use it for mechanobiology and other areas through the use of this new quantum-based or quantum technologies? I think that would be a big thing. Another big field, I think, is in sensing in terms of magnetic fields, for example. Mm-hmm. So these sensors are almost being not exactly deployed, but they have been thought of and proven. And now it's a question of of getting them to the stage of translation and building some prototypes and seeing how well they can do. I think that will be humongous breakthrough. And these are, if not quantum, then quantum inspired, but I think that I'm pretty much quantum with big applications, both in defense and in medicine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a spectrum really of what can you do in the near term. We have a sense for what quantum computing can do, but it's by nature a longer term proposition. Let me ask Tim the same question.
Yeah, as Halina said, it is the $1 million question. And I guess it also depends on exactly what you mean by the next big thing. But there's heaps of exciting things coming. And obviously, like you say, quantum sensing is one of these potential near-term applications of quantum tech, which is awesome. But I mean, my area is in quantum computing. And this very much is the long game. It's really hard to do what people want to do with quantum computing. But it's also super exciting what we potentially could do. I mean, we're only just starting to scratch the surface with what we could potentially do with the quantum computer. But I guess what I'm excited about, I mean, I'm excited about some of the sort of NISC algorithms that people have come up with. So near-term, noisy hardware. Can we use this noisy prototype style quantum computer to do something useful, something actually sort of commercially useful? So that could be quantum chemistry, simulation of molecules and chemical processes and things like this. This is something that's already a huge industry outside of quantum computing, and quantum computing just promises to sort of solve that problem better than sort of standard classical computing. But also, I'm a physicist, and there are cool things that could happen. We could do with quantum computers that's sort of, fundamental science. And that might not be of commercial interest to people, but there's some very awesome things that
it could lead to.
Sorry?
It could lead to commercial.
For sure. And so I better, I'd be remiss not to mention those sorts of applications that could come up. So for example, even just simulating fundamental physics, things like that, you sort of particle physics even, that could probe physics that the Large Hadron Collider can't probe, like energies that can't probe. And that can potentially be simulated on a quantum computer. So there's very, very exciting things that could be done. But I guess the real question is when
it's really good, and it's interesting that it's been very hard to get that succinct, because it doesn't exist probably, that succinct answer of this is what it's going to be, and it probably doesn't. No one has that. But Rebecca, let me just your sort of response to that, and then I'll wrap up. That would be great.
Sure. Yeah. I think I love the answers from Tim and Halina. I obviously made a bet on post-quantum security, which is a little bit of an adjacent area because it's protecting against quantum hacks, but it's incredibly important because if you think about data that gets hacked or stolen today, even if it's encrypted and they can't crack it now, if it's not encrypted in a post-quantum way, when the computers do come around in the next several years, that'll be cracked, and there's a lot of sensitive data that has a shelf life that's longer than that. My other bet and thing I'm very excited about is chemistry, and using quantum computers for simulation to ultimately come up with do drug discovery and explore the really tiny world in a way that we haven't been able to before.
Great answers, guys. Thank you so much. We've right down to the last seconds here. Tim, Halina, Rebecca, much appreciated for your time. It's been fantastic. I want to thank as well the City of Sydney again, and just let you know